All right. Good morning. Good afternoon for our friends in Germany. Is that right, William?
That's right. We're in Munich. Sunny Munich.
Awesome.
Beautiful day here in Munich.
Love it. And we got Bob back on stream. So welcome back, Bob.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, you have a prolific episode on MCG where you came in talking about tokenized equity long before the SEC gave any sort of guidance. So we have a little more guidance this past week. But yeah, welcome back, Bob.
Pleasure to be here with you guys.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, let's get right into it. Early morning stream for our fan base. I told them to get a coffee ready, so I hope they're going to enjoy that. But we'll clip up this segment for those that can't join us live. But we have NKP here, and William, I don't know if you want to start just giving an introduction of who NKP is. And I've done a bunch of research kind of over the last 24 hours, but we'll go through a bunch of stuff that you want to share today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for taking the time. I know it's early. We appreciate it, being flexible with our time zones here in Munich. So I'm Will Schumann. I'm CEO and president of Maduri Earth and also of Non-Kyoto Protocol, NKP, which is our digital asset arm of Maduri Earth. We launched, I think it's now been about 3 months. And Maduri Earth basically is an SPV, special purpose vehicle, to consolidate various projects in the impact space that we have ongoing across the world, including in Paraguay, including Dominican Republic, and a few other places that we already have in the pipeline, which we'll get to in a little bit later. So, the thesis behind NKP, Non-Kyoto Protocol, obviously, is a tongue-in-cheek name for our token based on the Kyoto Protocol, which came out, around 2006 to 8, which was the foundation, if you will, of the carbon markets and the compliance, realm of carbon space and impact investment. And so we thought it was a funny name because we are sort of decentralizing a very centralized finance space, if you will. And so it just worked. So we went with NKP. And NKP, like I mentioned, is a digital asset arm that's providing open access to these sort of projects that were very decentralized, very closed off to the everyday investor, huge ticket items, which we'll get into with our projects in a moment. So it was interesting because my son, who's on the other side of the camera, he asked me many times, like, how can I get involved in these types of projects that you're building? And I mean, the answer was you can't. Minimum ticket, $2.5 million, $5 million to get involved, US dollars, quite significant investment requirements. So it means that you have to have quite a significant capital base in order to even look at these sort of projects. They're arduous, they're time consuming. So that was part of the thesis for NKP, was how can we open up this space that is very centralized, it's behind closed doors. The world is now on the tip of the tongue. Obviously in 2006, during the entrance of the Kyoto Protocol, not a lot of people knew what carbon was, climate change, and these sort of concepts were very scientific. Now, it's on the tip of everybody's tongue: sustainability, ESG policies, climate change, if you will, sustainable use of resources. So that was our idea that, look, we can use Web3 tokenizing, let's just call it access, and we'll get in and elaborate more, during the course of this call. Tokenizing access to these very large capital, closed off, centralized projects. So, which would allow people obviously to invest, to participate in impact finance projects that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. And of course, I've got Henry Albrecht to my left here, who's also deeply in the carbon and finance space, impact finance, but also traditional finance. So I'm sure he'll have more to add to that as we go on.
Yeah, and I want to get into it and also get your introduction, Henry. But William, your mic still seems to be crackling a bit. I thought we had fixed this before the show. Everyone, apologies. So I don't know if maybe holding it.
How is that? Is it better or still poor?
It still has that crackling, unfortunately. I don't know if it's connected Bluetooth, and no worries. Take your time fixing it. This is a live show, so unlike a recorded podcast, this is, we deal with technical difficulties all the time. So
pull it a little bit closer, man.
Yeah.
Apologies. I thought we had that fixed.
Sometimes if it's Bluetooth, it's just the connectivity is like not. Yeah.
Let's try that now. How's that?
Yeah, that sounds a bit better. I'll let you know if it crackles again, but that sounds better. Sorry about that.
No,
if you want to
that's, yeah,
continue with introducing
technical
Henry.
difficulties.
Yeah, no worries.
So, yeah, so that was the thesis behind NKP as the digital asset arm of Maduri Earth. So at Maduri Earth, what we've done is through additional SPVs, special purpose vehicles, that I also own. Creative Carbon is one of them, which was the project developer of Chaco Vivo. The second project, SPV, is a company called Anomatech, obviously, which I own as well. And both of these projects that are being developed and allotted to the Maduri Earth sort of ecosystem, the NKP ecosystem, are part of these SPV developments. So Anomatech is the DR, Dominican Republic related waste valorization project. And Creative Carbon is the Paraguayan entity that is doing the development for Chaco Vivo. Chaco Vivo is the largest RED Plus conservation project in Paraguay. It's a first mover for Article 6 in the country, on track. Our other partner is currently in Taiwan, but with MADES, which is the Ministry of Environment. So it's a very large, it's a very visible, very transparent. We work with Transparency, one of Henry's companies, for digital monitoring as well. And then on the Dominican Republic side is the waste valorization. So they have multiple scope, multiple sort of revenue generation, and the sort of that attachment is me through my ownership of Maduri Earth, my ownership of Creative Carbon, and my ownership of Anomatech, thus ownership of revenue streams from those projects, where I've allocated arm and arm link contract legal to Maduri Earth certain amounts of the carbon revenue generating assets. That would be the carbon credits from these two projects.
Yeah, and William, I'm so sorry, but it's still crackling. I don't know if you can try and your fans here want to make sure they can hear you loud and clear.
No,
and we
for
want to make
sure.
sure
I'm
for
so sorry. We're gonna try a different approach
take
here.
your your time, guys. Honestly, there's
the
no
live
pressure.
stream. We're gonna try an
I just know for when we clip and stuff, it has to be clean, or else it's impossible to clip. So yeah, sorry about that, guys. This happens. It was fine before the show. I don't know.
It was perfect. Maybe just connectivity. How about now? Can you hear me better?
Perfect. That's perfect.
All right, we're gonna go with Apple earbuds. Henry, try yours maybe so you can hear.
True.
Me.
Tried and true. Steve Jobs. We got it. All right.
Can you hear Henry? Let Henry.
Yeah. That's perfect.
Oh, perfect. Let's do it. And we can hear you better as well. So this is
Wait,
actually
Henry,
better.
could you speak again? I want to make sure we're capturing you too.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, but just barely. It's very, very quiet.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Much
Perfect.
better.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay, if you can hear both of us.
Yeah. Thanks, gentlemen.
Speak. So anything in particular in the last?
Yes, sorry, William. I think what happens is Apple like tries to pick up the person that the earbuds are attached to. It's for some reason it keeps flipping between you two.
Give us one more. We got one more option.
We're gonna get
Could
through it.
just throw a whole phone on speaker that may work.
We have
Just
a
throw
microphone
on
Give us a
speaker.
sec.
It's funny how these issues always arise. I've been in scientific conferences that are a room full of 1,000 PhDs, and a presentation by like a premier professor will get delayed like 30 minutes because they're trying to get connected to a projector.
Yeah. Well, even Mark Zuckerberg, when he was doing the latest Meta glasses, like couldn't even get the demo to work. So,
It's on speaker. All right, guys, can you hear us now?
Yeah, that's not very great either. It's
like
try
super
talking a little
crackly
bit
right now.
more.
Switch to another device.
No, do you by chance have a laptop? Maybe. I don't know if instead of the phone.
Let us know one more device. Hang on.
Yeah,
We'll be
it
right back.
seems like it's the connection with the phone more than anything. That
Yeah,
might
I
be
think it's the
giving you.
Bluetooth. Give us one more
Yeah.
second. We're gonna reconnect.
Yeah. No rush. No rush. Take your time.
Sorry, guys.
And we can
Live.
get we can like restart too. So we'll get it dialed in.
All right, disconnect yours now.
Yeah, they may one solution may be if they both hop on separately, like in two different rooms in the office. That it's nice if they're both there, but
Yeah.
always funny how technical difficulties arise in
Oh,
these things.
yeah. I mean,
At least
I'm
it's
not an
not Meta, presenting a billion-dollar next tech
the
development.
market cap just starts crashing as he's doing it, Yeah, no, honestly, Mark Zuckerberg, he held his composure, but all he could do was awkwardly smile. So
That's okay. I don't think he was much affected by it. The
Mark,
lizard.
yeah, Mark's like,
Yeah, the lizard man underneath, completely
Yeah.
unemotional.
Yeah, made for a good viral clip, to be honest with you, which is sometimes better than it going well anyways. So whereabouts are you based, Bob? Are you North America?
I'm on the East Coast of the US.
Oh, so you're like me.
Got up just a little early. Are you East Coast as well?
Yeah. I'm in Toronto.
Oh, nice. A little bit of an early weekend morning.
Yeah, early weekend. Here, let's get Henry back on. All right.
How's it now?
It's great. Yes.
We've done it.
All right.
Cheers. Sorry, everybody listening for that. We did do a sound and video check before we started, but things failed.
Things fail. All right, let's take it from the top. I mean, you went through a bunch of stuff about the businesses, the different structures of them. Maybe one question I had is like our Prime Minister Mark Carney has actually written an entire book about like carbon credit systems and this kind of space that you're operating in. Can you just talk about this industry kind of separately? Like, what does the carbon credit market look like today? And obviously, this was a big buzzword, like, last kind of few years, and a lot of investment from government and companies. But like, do companies like invest in carbon credits and then it get offset? Like, can you just talk about this industry?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one both of us can put input on because we've been in the space for a long time. So you have two different sort of markets for carbon. One is the compliance market, which is what you mentioned, governments deploying capital for carbon, for emission reductions and things of that nature. Then you have the voluntary space. So the voluntary space is for corporations, even retail in some cases, where people want to offset their own greenhouse gas emissions footprint. You also have within that voluntary space, got people that just want to make sort of like conservation contributions or climate contributions. And these are voluntary sort of mechanisms. This is where Apple, Microsoft, big companies that we're all aware of, I mean, clothing companies, the gamut, will decide, both usually from their shareholder push, that we will offset emissions. And those can be scope 1, 2, 3. You may have heard of that before, depending on your sort of whatever industry you're involved in. But the biggest differentiator between the two is one is imposed upon you by governments and tax. The other one is a voluntary choice to get involved. Now, even in the voluntary space, you have some level of compliance, meaning that if your stakeholders, your shareholders in public companies have demanded such, then of course the onus is of the executive teams to sort of offset those footprints across their manufacturing, their supply chain, their entire operational footprint. So this is where we operate, is in primarily in the voluntary carbon space. Now, you've seen maybe potentially some of my tweets about Article 6.2 under the Paris Agreement. So this is a more sovereign level. I don't want to get into weeds too much because it's a very complicated sort of subject matter. But this Article 6 framework under the Paris Agreement allows bilateral transactions between countries. So let me just use Choco Vivo as a case study. You have a host country of Paraguay, and let's say you have Singapore, for instance, who's already signed an Article 6 agreement framework for bilateral transactions between those two countries. So Singapore may impose certain regulatory issues in Singapore, and then they do a bilateral agreement under Article 6, and they can trade these sort of sovereign emission reductions or quote unquote carbon credits in that sovereign level transaction. So although that we're in the voluntary space, voluntary carbon market, we're elevating, if you will, both of our projects into this Article 6.2 framework in both host countries. The first host country being Paraguay, the second one being the Dominican Republic or the DR. So both of the project developments, all of our project developments that we have ongoing at the moment, our target, our end objective is operating under this Article 6 framework that is allowed sort of an international sovereign space. So very important for us for several reasons. One is because the market pricing changes quite drastically when you have this high integrity voluntary carbon credit created at a project level that has been authorized at a sovereign level to be traded country to country. So it's a very big deal in the space for us. So I don't know if Henry has anything to add.
I think just one thing, and I'm happy to give an introduction in a second as
Yes,
well.
please, Henry.
For people that, you know, maybe are not as knowledgeable in the carbon markets that can become technical, why do we work towards these Article 6 credits? It's actually quite simple, right? The environment doesn't necessarily care too much if you sequester or avoid a ton of carbon in Germany or if you do it in Paraguay, right? It's a global issue that we're trying to combat here. However, it is much more expensive to either sequester or avoid a ton of carbon in Germany than it may be in Paraguay. And the Article 6 credits are a mechanism for us as a global society to actually allocate funds to nations, host nations, that have less emissions than their more developed peers in the Western world, and achieve CO2 and general climate outcomes at a lower price per, in this example, ton. So it's a way for us to actually be more efficient with the way that we allocate the funds in order to solve a global crisis, which is obviously climate change.
Yeah, can I give people another real example, and then you tell me how this works or if I'm right or not? So when you book a flight, for instance, it allows you to offset your CO2 emissions, and that's basically you buying a carbon credit. On the other side of the marketplace, there's someone saying, hey, I'm going to take that amount of CO2 out of the atmosphere, either by doing direct carbon capture or some sort of offset system. Is that a correct example? And there's a marketplace to allow that?
Absolutely. I mean, it's something near and dear to us actually, because we are working on, obviously can't disclose on this AMA today, but some with airlines, with specific on this very point that you're making, because, you know, one of the issues associated with the climate market is what in my first monologue, was that these transactions and these projects were very centralized, and they were developed behind closed doors, for lack of a better word. And everything is moving, including the carbon markets, towards transparency. I mean, that's the name of Henry's company, is Transparency, which is very important because these markets were very opaque. The projects were very opaque. Only those in the know really knew what was going on in the transactions. And something that we've seen in the retail space, which is also why I said the decentralization and the opening up and the access to these projects has become more widespread, and the desire and demand is there. Because even now people on airlines are thinking, well, I would really love to offset my carbon footprint for this flight, but I want to know where this money's going. I would like to see what project it's offsetting. Because the way the market has sort of evolved is, before everything was about climate change. It was about CO2, one in, one out, sort of straight mathematics. That it has changed drastically in the last few years When you hear the word sometimes integrity, the transparency is obviously important in that term, but they also mean co-benefits. Like, what else are we doing outside of just offsetting 1 ton of CO2? What I mean by that is money from this project trickling down to indigenous communities? Is it trickling over to rural communities that are under, levels of poverty? Biodiversity, important biodiversity that may also be positively impacted by this project. So Choco Vivo, for instance, you really have 3 major impacts. And you have climate impact, then you have community social impact, and then you have biodiversity impact. So we have 5+ endangered species, 13 near threatened, IUCN, these are red listed species that are, at risk for extinction on planet Earth. And people don't realize the benefits that biodiversity has to ecosystems outside of climate change, whether there's climate change or there's no climate change. Destruction of birds, for instance, migratory birds can destroy areas in thousands of kilometers radius to the project center. So these projects have very, very wide impact, both global, climate change, global warming, greenhouse gas reductions, but also for people, human health, human survival, water courses, water transpiration around the globe, and then animals, of course, the biodiversity aspect. So huge aspects of additional impacts of these projects that now are central, not just secondary or tertiary, but are central to the impacts of this sort of global, this impact finance space. So,
Yeah.
without these things, the money doesn't flow there.
Yeah, I actually have your Midori Earth site up here, and I see Choco Vivo Red Plus, and it says 12.8 million Paraguay, and then SFM Waste Valorization Plant 18.5 million Dominican Republic. So these are portfolio value of $31 million, and then it says about 4 million tons mitigated. 2 active projects. Can you just walk us? So these are the 2 assets that we've been discussing. What stages are both these projects in? Are they fully operational, or are you still scaling these?
No, absolutely. They're fully operational. And let me give you a little bit of background about both of these projects.
Please.
Start with Choco Vivo. So Choco Vivo started officially in 2021, with the project start January 1st, 2022. It is a huge project, 187,916 hectares. So for people in the United States, that's over 430,000 acres, somewhere around there, if my math is correct. 1,800 square kilometers is larger than Greater London in scale. Just to give you a perspective of the scale, obviously you can bring up Henry's website too, Transparency, where there's a full tracking of Choco Vivo on there, digital tracking, where people can learn more about the project. But you're talking about an asset value of about $350 million. Now, this is the land asset of our partner, Atenil SA in Paraguay, that has to secure and lock up this space and this land that could be used for other things for 40-year period. Okay, so that is a massive commitment from large capital asset holder, because this land could be used for many other things to generate revenues. Keep in mind what I just said too. This project started in 2021. More than $25 million invested in OpEx. I've spent personally, you can open up the Vera app and you can see the documentation. The project description documentation is pushing 700 pages. And that is a compilation of supporting documentation and data. Then the monitoring report, which I'm not going to get too much in the weeds, but it's also 400, 500, 600 pages. So these are very, very arduous, daunting projects. They're very expensive. They're very time consuming. So how that works in a nature-based solution project, which is the category of Choco Vivo, meaning that it's utilizing nature as the base solution for the mitigation or the sequestration of, or the reduction of CO2. Here we are now in, move in 2026. And the project has gone through development phases, through monitoring phases, meaning that forestry measurements, all of the data from remote sensing, which Henry has been involved in with us in the project, also as an investor. So it's not just as a technical partner. So it's just a very, very complicated and complex, time-consuming project. But to get right to the point, to answer your question, it started in 2021 in development, officially in 2022, January 1st. First 2 years of operation are monitoring periods required by the methodology. And then you have to monitor sort of what has been deforested, what hasn't been deforested, what are the emissions, what are the emission reductions, so on and so on. That's all elaborated in those 2 documents that I just mentioned. You can bring them up should you wish to on the Vera link that I provided before this call. And now, so all of that happens sort of in the field. And then this massive of project supporting documentation then is submitted to an auditor. That audit happened at the end of last year in December. And then those auditors compile an additional set of documents, also probably about 1,000 pages, with the combination of this information in a data room sent to Vera. So Vera, VERRA, is a nonprofit out of Washington, D.C. that has sort of developed the voluntary carbon methodology and market since, I think they've been around since 2008 or 9, right after the clean development mechanism under the Kyoto Protocol, to develop this sort of voluntary carbon market. So very arduous process, very time consuming, very expensive, heavily asset based. And basically they're reviewing all of those documents now. We expect, actually, we expect any moment, that review to be completed, the technical review and issuance. We anticipated October, November, like we said from the beginning. That's still on track. I checked as early as this morning. It's proceeded to the next phase, the final phase. So, I mean, those credit issuances are imminent. You mentioned something, just to be clear, on Maduri Earth webpage. Keep in mind what we've allocated to NKP is a small portion of the overall scale of these projects. So Chaco Vivo, for instance, phase 1 is the 187,000 hectares. It's going to generate about 30 million carbon credits over the first couple of years of the project. I sent you an image of that issuance schedule on there, should you want to bring it up and let people see it. But that is part 1. So part 2 of this project, which we're working on now, is additional property. We're not sure on the total scale, but it's going to be somewhere around another 150,000 hectares, which will double the scale of Chaco Vivo. From that, my ownership of a percentage of the project as the official project developer, all confirmed on the Vera website as well. This is one of the beauties, I think, and a unique sort of value proposition for NKP, is everything that we talk about is verifiable from someone else other than me. Meaning that you can go to a third-party website, Vera, you can see the information. You can go to Paraguay national government and you can get validation. You can go to third-party investors and partners and collaborators and see this information and verify this information. So it's very different than typical Web3 projects, which are wild speculation. You don't know if it's factual. You just have to kind of a trust without verification, acumen, if you will. So I think that's one of the big value propositions that we have in this space for our Web3 project, is all third-party verifiable.
Yeah.
But both of the projects are in their final stages of issuance for phase 1, because I've only spoken about Paraguay. We also have the Dominican Republic. So you can see from some of my recent tweets that that project in itself started in 2016. It was the culmination of a United States Trade and Development Agency feasibility study. That means the US government was involved in it, also verifiable. And then it now is built and operating. Obviously, you can see the photos of the operation. Not only is it built and operating, our chief projects officer, Brad Godfrey, a wizard, unfortunately, he couldn't travel here with me because he's too busy scaling that project up as we speak. So not only is that up and running, it's already scaling. So both of these projects, that never mind projects in our pipeline, the foundation of these projects, 2 very important points that I want to make on this AMA is that we've only allocated a small portion of what we can potentially allocate towards Maduri Earth. We'll get into that a little bit later in this call. But these projects are asset-based, third-party verifiable. You can fly there, you can touch it and feel it should you so desire, and you don't have to take my word for it. You can look at Vera and track it. You can look at other locations and track these projects. So from that regard, the questions that I've received from the beginning of this, one of them was apprehension or disbelief that you don't have access to these projects, but that's very clear and verifiable, as I said. So I think we can put that one to bed and move on to like building now new pipeline projects, looking at the base foundation of these very visible first mover projects in the Article 6 space. In all honesty, we're talking about assets backing. Does Maduri Earth own these assets? No. Maduri Earth is a project developer in these projects that has assets of carbon credits that we're allocating to NKP. Will we build our own assets? Absolutely. It's part of our thesis. Using the revenues from what we already own to sort of generate profits, put that money back into NKP, Maduri Earth, build out new projects, which we'll get to in a minute, and sort of use these massive capital projects. We're talking about over $400 and $500 million already, backing real world assets, backing these projects of which you're participating in as a holder of NKP. That's real, that's factual, that's verifiable. So I think that's one of the most important points that I wanted to make about this whole sort of relationship and this arm's length sort of transactional space that we're operating in with Maduri Earth.
So I got a number of questions here. First off, the facility that you're developing here, what is the purpose of this facility? So from my understanding, Choco Vivo is you're basically, it's kind of like maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Steve Irwin was famous for saying, I'm going to buy all the land I can on Earth because I want to invest in conservation. And if you give me money, I will spend it on buying land so that no one ever touches it. Right.
I'm a huge fan as well, Steve.
Like
R.I.P.
Rest in peace, Steve Irwin, childhood role model. So is that accurate for describing Choco Vivo?
Choco Vivo is a nature-based solution, NBS. Right. It is a land-based conservation project.
Land-based conservation, got it.
Land-based conservation. The acronym is REDD, R-E-D-D plus. So that just means reducing emissions from avoided deforestation and forest degradation.
Got it.
Meaning that for Choco Vivo, it's also called an avoided planned deforestation project. So there was a lot of I guess global articles that came out, The Guardian, that were really attacking nature-based solutions and REDD projects in particular, but they were specifically attacking a project called an avoided unplanned deforestation project. So these are very distinct project types. They're both REDD, but they're very different because Choco Vivo is, they love acronyms, is an APD, avoided planned deforestation. The other one's receiving a lot of sort of the controversies or avoided unplanned deforestation, meaning that there was no clear risk on that sort of area being deforested. In Paraguay, for lots of different reasons we probably won't get into on this call, but the Triple Alliance War, land ownership in Paraguay became privatized. And that was based because they had to sell lands off to pay for war debts after a war called the Triple Alliance War. So in the Chaco, you have 99% of that land is owned by private landholders that have bought that property for profit generating operations. And 90% of the profit generating operations are conversion of those ecosystems to pasture for cattle.
Right. Yep.
Meaning it's full conversion. They cut everything and they even set it on fire. So Choco Vivo, the same thing. The landowners bought this land for private profit, but their acumen started to change. So they really have a holistic outlook. They are believers in sustainability. They are sort of concerned, if you will, on lack of funds going to indigenous populations, destruction of biodiversity, destruction of ecosystems, so on and so on. So they made the conscious decision to try to save this property. And if it was not for the voluntary carbon market, you know, they also call this market carbon finance for a reason. It's because you are opening up a new sort of business opportunity to provide money or revenues to a company that otherwise would not exist without that carbon market.
Right.
So voided planned deforestation is Chaco Vivo, meaning they have legal permits to deforest this area. So there's zero ambiguity about the deforestation risk. It's extremely clear. So back to your point, you asked a question a minute ago just about the markets and the news and things like that. And there has been a lot of news and a lot of sort of controversy surrounding RED in particular, but they failed to mention that that's an avoided unplanned deforestation project, wildly different than Chaco Vivo.
And well, if I can just add, I mean, you know, as William kind of alluded to, I have a company that does geospatial analytics. So we use satellite data, remote sensing data to analyze carbon projects across the entire world. And if you look at the specific example of Chaco Vivo, almost or now over 7 million hectares have been lost in a time span of 22, 23-year period, which for those that know European geography is the country of Luxembourg being lost in Paraguay every single year. I mean, that is incredible. And we can see through remote sensing and satellite data how severe that risk really is. And we use that data to track and to validate and verify the underlying risk that exists to not only the carbon stored within that ecosystem, but certainly also all of the endangered and critically endangered and threatened species that William alluded to earlier. So I have been exposed with many carbon projects across the world. And, you know, with a hand on to my heart, I can say that Chaco Vivo is probably the highest quality project I've seen out there, simply because the Gran Chaco, which is the second largest, you know, forest ecosystem in South America, is one of the most threatened areas on Earth. And if we don't start to act now, whether you're a large scale investor or a small scale investor who wants to just contribute, we will find a continent without forest.
I totally agree, Henry. I see the vision for this. Absolutely. Henry, can you just expand on your role with NKP and just maybe how you guys got connected? And
yeah, you have to, I talk a lot, so you just have to cut me off.
Yeah.
The mute button for William doesn't exist. No, I'm kidding.
So I'm based out of Europe. I studied in the US, but my family has a family office, and we invest into climate-related projects, you know, green infrastructure and many different verticals. And one of the verticals is carbon projects. We have exposure in South America through, for instance, Chaco Vivo, but also in New Zealand and here in Europe. And I had the pleasure of meeting William because we were actively trying to invest into Paraguay, into RED+, because we've identified the significant threat to the natural ecosystem in the so-called Gran Chaco. So, you know, William is a quite well-known figure in the local context of Paraguay. So through mutual international as well.
Just kidding.
Through mutual connections, we got together, and I told him ourselves and a consortium of investors out of Europe, we want to participate in the project. And through that, I've been fortunate enough to travel to Paraguay, visit Chaco Vivo numerous times, do all of the DD, and then ultimately became an investor in Chaco Vivo as well. And on top of that, also the connection then to NKP. With my company Transparency, we do so-called digital monitoring, reporting, and verification, which means we use remote sensing data to assess carbon projects and ensure that those have a high integrity also in the credit sale. And the reason why remote sensing is so powerful is because as long as you don't manipulate that data, which we don't do, it is an objective source of data that can be used and cannot be falsified by individual governments. So many carbon projects in, for instance, Asia that have received criticism, we would have detected basically their non-compliance very easily. And through that engagement, and now also through NKP, I've gotten the opportunity to get to know the projects in and out, and I'm very excited also about the idea of decentralization, We were one of the first miners, early stage miners out of Europe. So, I know Web3 quite well, and I believe that especially the ability to invest into, not necessarily only tons of carbon, but kilograms of carbon provides a unique opportunity for any type of stakeholder to participate, which I think is needed for climate change. We need to give access to your average Joe, normal person or investor, and not the sole bubble of what we currently live in the carbon markets.
So true.
Absolutely. So we have a bunch of questions around the businesses, and I'll get into these here. And thanks, Bob, for consolidating these. And this actually ties into the screenshot I had on screen of the building that you guys are building there. But one of the questions was from the DR landfill. You said that there'll be 75,000 credits annually, estimated to be 2.5 million annual revenue. When will this flow of credits start? And to confirm, that was a landfill processing facility that you're building?
Yeah. So what it is, back in my tweets, you'll see some of the open dump. We call them landfills to be very kind, but in the Dominican Republic, there's over 300 open dumps. So, one of the most, if you profound and probably harmful greenhouse, most people say CO2 because we've taken because of the Kyoto Protocol and even in the voluntary market, we've equated every sort of greenhouse gas emission to tons of CO2 equivalent. Okay, but there are other gases that are much more harmful than CO2, such as methane. So methane in these dumps in the Dominican Republic, just like I mentioned, a nature-based solution has sort of a myriad of impacts outside of the core carbon. Landfills and dumps are catastrophes in every sense of the definition. They cause cancer, they cause widespread health issues. In a place like Dominican Republic, where you have dumps in open ground, you have microplastic issues. I saw a recent study, I think your alma mater was involved, Yale, that 100% of tissue on around globe, they went all around Earth. It was like 7 universities, all the way from like Siberia to Antarctica, that they took tissue from living things, and 100% of tissue had microplastics in it. They say now our brain has over a gram of microplastic. This is all coming from dumps and single-use plastics and things going into water.
It's one of the biggest shames of our lifetime, to be honest with you.
It is a huge shame, and if you actually go to these locations where they're perpetually on fire, you have particulate matter going into space. I had someone made a comment on my ex from the United States saying, that's the Dominican Republic, it's not my problem. Not understanding the complexity of this sort of environmental disaster, because it is your problem. Because all of that material, toxins, dioxins, are going to the atmosphere, they're going into water courses, they're going into the oceans, causing massive ecological damage and marine life damage in the oceans that are dispersed across the globe now. So all of these are everyone's problems, but I'm not going to get into preaching on that. But what we do is we are basically closing these dumps where 100% of the MSW is the acronym, municipal solid waste, is now being diverted from a dump, an open dump, which is also capped and closed. And then that material is coming to a waste processing plant, a waste valorization plant, which includes sort of full waste processing. So all of the recyclables are withdrawn and removed, irons, plastics, paper, whatever. And then you have a secondary line. And unfortunately, I wish Brad was here because he's the tech wizard and the engineer on our project in DR. You also have sort of a refuse-derived fuel line, which is material that can't be recycled. But instead of that going to the landfill, it's created into a fuel that then goes to boilers that use heavy fuel oil, diesel, maybe wood chips, and other sort of less environmentally friendly circular economy sort of fuels. And then finally, the third line there is a compost line where everything organic then is composted, biochar is created, and then all this material then is used to go back, is tested to make sure there's no toxins or any sort of dioxins or anything in it, PFAs and all these things you may read about, so that material doesn't go back into the soil. So a soil amendment then goes back into the soil to produce ag, improve soil qualities and things of that nature. So it's a complete landfill avoidance. It's not partial avoidance. And if there are some materials that are landfilled, they're landfilled properly on site in a engineered landfill, a proper landfill, where nothing goes into the environment, stays inside of a lined and capped landfill. Most of the time, that's only inert material that isn't producing any gases anyway, because it's sort of in a non-aerobic environment, so it's not producing greenhouse gas emissions. So it is a win-win-win for everybody. It's win internationally, it's win for waste disposal, certainly win for a small island country like the Dominican Republic. We're also working on some projects of this kind in Paraguay, and also recently we have some coming into the pipeline in Africa, where I live.
So if I could break in, so these
Please.
assets, I think what I'm curious about is, how do those assets generate revenues, or like, what is the business side of these assets? Obviously, these are big problems that we have to solve, and totally agree.
Yeah.
The business side of it, like, how do you guys make money doing these?
So very simple. Obviously, the waste that was once disposed at a landfill, someone pays for that. So now that tipping fee goes to the waste valorization plants. So that's one stream. Then you have multiple streams. You have obviously all the recyclable material that I just mentioned, plastic, metal, other things of that nature, that paper, are coming out as now revenue generating points from the product. Then you have non-recyclable material coming out as fuel. So that fuel is then sold on to manufacturers on the island, and there's a lot of them, to replace heavy fuel oil, typically at a higher BTU value. So they're getting more energy efficiency in their boilers, lower emissions, and then it's circular. So they're not having to import fossil fuels. So it's a reduction in fossil fuels, cyclical, because we're not replacing the trash at the moment, unfortunately. We're closer to reduction of fossil fuel than we are reduction of trash,
Got
unfortunately.
it. And can I ask,
then
quick,
the compost and the biochar. So we have multiple revenue streams, which before were all thrown into a hole in the ground and set on fire.
yes, and so sorry for cutting you off there.
No,
I
please do.
have another question. Is that money coming from the carbon credit market, or is it coming from the local municipality that's paying the local tax base, paying taxes, and running a landfill?
So the final revenue stream was the carbon credits, because you have multiple GHG remission, greenhouse gas reductions across that entire supply chain, from fuel reduction, plastic manufacturing, fossil fuel use, so on and so on. So it also creates carbon. So the carbon then is sold in the voluntary market, either in the Article 6.2, which we're working on, or to corporations, particularly to corporations that have a keen interest on reduction of waste. So they know that that's an additional revenue stream for them. The other revenue streams are governments paying tipping fees for trash, and then companies that are buying the plastic, the metals, the paper for recycling into new manufacturing. So there's multiple revenue streams from these projects that create the revenues, if you will, from the infrastructure that is invested in, the capital asset that's invested in to produce the assets.
Got it. And then okay. So then the other project is just based on the carbon credits. There's no like additional. It's
there are additional streams that can come out of that from sustainable forest management. So very select wood harvest, that you can do sort of co-benefit projects with communities, such as new sort of circular economy, job creation and things of that are enterprise creation, if you will. There's biodiversity potentially credits that can come out of that. And then there's like tourism and things of that nature. So there's a lot of sort of supplemental income sources, but the primary income source is the carbon credits.
Right. And so is this business revenue positive today, or are you guys pre-revenue on these assets?
Well, both. So the DR project is in revenues, but it's pre-carbon issuance. Okay, so it's making a revenue from its tangibles, and it's the carbon credits will be issued first quarter 2026. So we got a couple of months finishing sort of the validation and verification. Then it'll be generating revenues from the carbon. For Choco Vivo, it's both pre-issuance but also revenue generated, because it's revenue generated from pre-sales of carbon credits in a pre-issuance state, meaning prior to validation, verification, and issuance from Vera.
And maybe if I can just jump in, that's kind of also where we got involved. why do you pre-purchase carbon credits? I mean, the reality is that we believe, and the big players, McKinsey, BCG, Deloitte, if you look at the projections on the carbon markets, I think most of them, or if not all, agree that we're going to see a significant growth in global carbon markets as we approach 2030, 2040, and 2050, simply because climate change is coming and the Paris targets are starting to kick in, right? And now, as an investor, being conscious of that trend coming, you try to pre-select and act early on high quality projects, right? And high quality projects are not like sand on a beach. There's actually more than a handful, but there are select, few of very high quality carbon projects. And investors or pre-purchasers, they are willing to take on a possibility, not really in Chaco Vivo anymore, but other ones that issuance might not come, right? But you're taking on that pre-purchase risk to get access to these high quality carbon credits.
It's kind of like raising capital to get these projects kind of moving and started and the resources deployed is kind of where.
Exactly. And especially if those funds are then very frequently, at least I know that in Chaco Vivo, reinvested into the project, meaning it's not just paid out as a dividend, but it's used to establish new training programs. It's used to implement camera traps, GPS collars to ensure biodiversity levels are maintained. Then this is a project that's really pursuing quality versus just having the objective of maximizing the bottom line.
Yeah. And Bob came on our show actually talking about NKP. I don't want to misquote Bob, but I pinned the clip at the top. I think he said that these businesses could generate $10 million a year in revenue. Please correct me if I'm wrong on that. And when do you kind of project that might kick in?
That's not these businesses, but the allocation to NKP. These businesses, if you just do the math, Chaco Vivo, for instance, will issue about 30 million credits at a target price between $15 and $25 a metric ton. So you're talking about 750 million revenues over the next 4 or 5 years. Massive. Wow. The only the allocation to NKP at the moment is 100.
Wait, sorry. So you're saying $750 million in revenue that Chaco Vivo will generate? That's incredible.
That's correct. These are not, but keep in mind, you have a $400 million asset backing that that's locked up for 40 years.
Yeah.
So you have to amortize that property over a 40-year period also within that revenue. And you only generate revenues in the first 10 years, basically, which you have to carry over your monitoring period of a 40-year period. So it's a big number, but it's also a long project. And that's a nature-based solution. The industrial solution, the active investment of capital to create this new sort of thing, like the Dominican Republic, that's a technology project.
Yeah.
That one will generate significant as well, not only from its revenues from its tangibles, but we'll do about 750,000 metric tons of carbon a year at $36, $35 a metric ton, because it's a technology investment. It gets a little bit higher market price than a nature-based solution. Don't ask me why, because I think nature-based solutions should get a wildly higher price in the market, but they don't.
But is that due to, because there's two ways to measure carbon credits, and correct me if I'm wrong. One way is it's like a equivalent offset, and the other is it's direct carbon capture. Do I have that correct?
Yes, both. There is a direct carbon capture, which has proven so far not to be as effective and efficient as some of the other ones. But where you're going is the other direct action for the landfill, for instance, requires a capital and infrastructure technology in order to mitigate those greenhouse gas emissions that would have otherwise occurred. The nature-based solution isn't much different, but traditionally, what Henry mentioned a moment ago, even with the high integrity projects, there are only a handful globally. We're not talking about, as he mentioned, it's not sand on a beach. I mean, it's probably 5 globally where you have a project of this size where the land is owned by a single landowner. Typically, how these larger projects are put together in the nature-based space is you may have 40 landowners that come together under some sort of concession agreement. Massive risk associated with those because, of course, you get too upset, they want to withdraw. Those two usually snowball, the other people want to withdraw. So Choco Vivo has these additional elements of sort of integrity, risk mitigation that make it a highly valuable project.
Right.
But it's also a reduction project from an avoidance activity,
Got it.
meaning that we're simply avoiding cutting this so that we can access this carbon market. So because it's that avoidance slash reduction compared to a technology implementation, it just has a different outlook on the market. I mean, you can't get away from market 101. Buyers, sellers, demand, supply, all comes into play. So that's the only reason for the price differentiator.
Got it.
Differentiator.
I
Now,
want. Sorry.
go
Yeah.
ahead.
Finish your thought.
No, I was just going to say, but the revenue totals, that's the project revenue totals. The allocations to Maduri Earth and NKP, you can do
Yeah.
the similar math. We've got 100,000 metric tons allocated right now from Choco Vivo. We're considering expanding that greatly. And we have also 75,000 a ton coming from our DR access, our project, which we can expand that greatly as well too. But that one is 75,000. Just if you want to do the quick math, you can say 100,000 credits from Choco Vivo, $15 to $25 a metric ton, or 30 to 35 a metric ton, 75,000. That'll give you the current allocated revenues to Maduri Earth / NKP.
Right. And so that's flowing. Then those allocations are flowing to the token. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Well, what the thesis is that we are doing two things. Obviously, we'll get into this too because of the token to equity transition that we're
Yeah, let's like dive into the token specifically here. So what I want to know is like revenue potentially in the future flowing through to the token, when you think that'll be, and then also with the equity piece, when a holder is buying the token, they buy, let's say 1%, which is like worth, I don't know, as 6 mil market cap is like 60K worth. Like what are they getting for that investment?
So the allocation, again, participation in these very large projects with, I think if you want to talk about speculation, is the speculative portion of this is that we, as owners of a larger percentage of these projects, can allocate a lot more to Maduri Earth from the existing foundational projects. Plus, we're taking this revenue from these huge projects and allocating it already to the Maduri Earth NKP ecosystem. The allocation is 30% into buybacks. Of course, that does all the things buybacks do. It reduces supply long term, and it's very specific for us. It's very strategic. I think this was a concept that normal Web3 couldn't really grasp because, typically buybacks now in the Web3 space is really an artificial sort of reduction of circulating supply in order to move charts. That's not the way we look at it. We're looking at a specific allocation because we are making a transition to equity of what we consider undervalued or low price circulation that we want back into the company. So those buybacks are very strategic for us in that regard. However, it does have price effects because it does reduce supply, which, demand supply 101, less supply, hopefully higher demand. The other part is the 70% of these revenues, which we are immediately reinvesting into new project acquisitions that are 100% under Maduri Earth. Potentially, because some of these projects that I've mentioned in the past, waste to fuel, our biochar developments, we even have a logistics park development on the biochanic. I'll elaborate on that in a minute that we're working on. These also are very large cap projects. So the revenue streams that we'll reinvest in there will be portions. This is why partnerships are so important for us. Partnerships with Henry from an investor and monitoring standpoint. I've mentioned some already in the past, Jealous Devil, that we've already done a large sort of tech revenue generating partnership that we're working on as we speak. Taruma SA, which is a large forestry company in Paraguay, Bloom, and then the existing relationships, Creative Carbon, which is my company, Ateneo SA, Paraguay owns Choco Vivo, MSA in the DR, which owns the landfill project, Transparency, and then Anomatech. So partnerships will always be key to what we're doing because the deployment of our assets into new sort of infrastructure is going to require partnerships. Where if we have $150 million logistics park that we're working on right now, obviously we don't have that capital solely to make that a 100% Maduri Earth project. But what we can do is develop it, invest, have that equity stake with a large partner, maybe even like Nordwind Capital, and they get involved with us on with multiple different equity and debt partners. So we'll have pieces of these very large projects. So that sort of business acumen, if you will, is not changing as we go forward. Do we have some smaller projects that'll be only ours? Absolutely. We already have some that we'll talk about in a few moments. But scaling this is our ultimate objective, as Henry mentioned. For us to do massive impact, we have to have massive scale. Not that these projects are small, because they're not. They're huge in magnitude. But we want to 20x it. So 20x is going to require 20x capital. You're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of capital. So, all of these partnerships matter. All of these connections matter. Forming these little partnerships that may, in the short term, not really move like everybody in Web3 wants things to happen on an hourly basis. That's not going to happen with NKP, unfortunately. But what is going to happen is we're going to scale into, $400 or $500 million asset base that we own a great percentage of, and we're going to do that rapidly.
Yeah, and I'll give Henry, I'll give you some credit. Like, I think a lot of people misunderstood the importance of long-term invested capital and quality capital versus the retail flows of crypto. So to have someone at the table who's already vision aligned and mission aligned in something as important as this, but also with the financial means to back and bring these projects to completion, like it does that in itself is very valuable. So I just want people to understand that that not a lot of people can make those pieces move together. So yeah, you mentioned a lot of different things in terms of like adding more projects here. Do you have maybe a document or something that like you can point to and say, yeah, all right, NKP holders, the market cap is 6 million and that represents X percentage of all these different pieces? Like, is there a legal contract or something that has that, or is that still being worked out of what those percentages are?
No, absolutely. I mean, we have legal contracts with the foundational projects already solidified. One thing that you'll never get from particularly my side and from NKP is a dissemination of information that isn't secure. And what I mean by that is I dislike, from the Web2 space in my 30-year career, information what you might do. Or, you hear people say, I'm going to do this. That is not data driven. As an engineer, that does nothing for me. It's just noise, actually useless noise. I want to see, what have you done? So if you have the contract in hand and the business is being developed, certainly that's something that could be articulated in shareholder documents and things of that nature. So on the foundational space, absolutely, everything's legal, contractually driven, signed in the various jurisdictions where these projects are operating, and even in the United States. We have some new pipeline projects that are underway. Waste to fuel, that is at the moment 100% Maduri Earth project. I want to scale that up, however. We're making about a $1.6 million investment as we speak. That'll be a Maduri Earth project, but I really want to scale that up to about a $10 million investment. Big margins on that, which I don't know if we'll get into right now, but certainly I'm going to post some information post this AMA, since the information is now out there. But that is basically taking plastic waste, converting it back into a fuel product. We can take it all the way to a sustainable aviation fuel. If we desire to, obviously that takes a larger investment. So these investments we try to look at stepwise, get to early stage revenue, scale up, and then diversify, obviously, in increasing the technology capacity, like taking a blend, a diesel blend, and then taking that into a sustainable aviation fuel just takes another step. We also have a biochar project that we've been already engaged in. We're ramping that one up as we speak as well. And I'll post this AMA, put some information out there on exactly what that looks like. What is our percentage at the moment? Where are we going with it? What the revenues look like? What revenues will be flowing back into Maduri Earth? But all of these projects I'm talking about are now. These are like first quarter, 2000, maybe even this last quarter, not foundational projects. So I'm talking about pipeline projects, the new ones, the waste to fuel, biochar, and a few others. But these projects will generate revenues within the next 3 to 4 months max. The biochar will just start generating revenues as early as this month. So those are very interesting projects that are coming under, this NKP sort of ecosystem, if you will. And then the larger ones that we're working on, like a logistics park on the Bioceanica Highway. That's a huge project. That'll never be 100% Maduri Earth NKP, but certainly a portion of it. And that one's still under development, so we can't say too much about that one at the moment, but it is underway and it is going to be brought on board.
Okay, let me actually back you up just a moment to kind of go back over this a little bit more clearly with people. So you're saying that there's going to be some token to equity relationship, but you're saying right now you can't disclose details because that's not all said and done and wrapped up. Is that the current state of things?
On the token to equity, it's, this has nothing to do with the revenues side of things.
Right.
What we have found, obviously, is that the process is very complicated. It's very complex, as it should be, because what we love about tokens in Web3 is that it's decentralized, relatively unregulated. You can have a bit of pseudonymity, if you will, or even anonymity, if you will. And these are some of the things that draw people towards the Web3. But it's also some of the things that draw people away from Web3, particularly regulators. So we look at everything we do with the deploying of technology, for instance, which includes Web3. There's some things just you don't need to deploy technology on. I mean, there's some things where it adds value, and some things you're just deploying technology for the sake of technology's sake. So what we don't want to do is just do that with this Web3 token to equity and just have launched a token simply just to go to a share, to a securities where we're going to be regulated by SEC, or going to be regulated in Dubai or Singapore or the Bahamas, so on and so on. There is going to be some regulation, like it or not. That part we found out clear. What I can say clearly is we've deployed resources, money, both in the accounting aspect, obviously, for first and foremost, what do we need to do is provide a audited financials on evaluation of Maduri Earth and what is this asset? What are you holding? What percentage of what are you holding? Is it already $150 million company? Is it a $30 million company? Is it a $500 million company? What is that number? So we're working on that and deploying resources already. We've also engaged multiple different legal firms in different jurisdictions to try to get us. I think this is, Bob, one of the things that you say you do well as a veteran, ex-military guy, resonates with me, is somebody to help you walk through the minefield so you don't blow your foot off. So that can happen very quickly in legal and complex legal and regulatory regulated spaces. So we're walking through that space carefully with a mind sniffing dog and with lawyers to help us do that. That is in process, however. So I think that's the main point. And we are aggressively seeking this. So this isn't, again, I know trust is an issue in Web3, but as a person Henry's known for a long time, I avoid making comments about things that we're not actively doing. It's not what we're going to do. We're doing it right now. So the scale, the time span, to be honest, I have no idea, but I think it's about a 6-month time span for us to get to that space. So
okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. That generally speaking, in crypto, tokens have no legal obligations or authority or entitlement to anything. It's all trust me, bro. And what many investors in crypto are afraid of is you run your whole business and then you just pocket the money yourself, right? And the people left are just left holding the bag, right?
90% of the stuff I've seen, that's the case. And obviously,
exactly.
In Web 2, that lands you in different spaces than Web 3.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that this man sitting to my left and his group would not have invested 1 cent in what we're doing if we didn't have fiduciary duty to them. So, our objective with NKP obviously is access to the simple man, if you will, like my son, like me at one point, guys that have smaller amounts of capital but really want to do good with it and also earn some money. But institutional investors are never going to invest in a Web3 crypto token without fiduciary to that investment. So that is very important for us as we scale. So we have two options. We can create a fiduciary with the token to a quasi holding, or we can make it a true equity piece with rights and control and fiduciary to a parent company that holds real world assets. Plan B is, for me, the most optimal goal line. However, plan A is not bad either, because at least you've created a fiduciary and a flow down capacity for revenue generation. Because if you own an Apple stock, you own it for various reasons. One, the appreciation of the stock, and maybe distribution of dividends and things of that nature. So I think we can get to a space with NKP similar to that, which would be just short of a fully regulated sort of equity piece in a parent. But our goal, our objective, and what we're spending resources on, and a lot of resources are on the secondary option, where we have a token that represents Maduri Earth, ownership in that, with $200-300 million in assets, where we can go to the table with Nordwind Capital, Goldman Sachs, whomever, and really get a seat at the table to discuss larger business developments. Because, we're only talking a couple $100 million here. I mean, I don't want to be flipping about a couple $100 million, because I'm not. But we have the capacity of building $1 billion in something here, and we need to keep our eyes on that target.
Yeah. So if I may, to make it simple for people, when we talk about, there's the promises we make, and then how we're held accountable to those promises. What are the negative consequences if we break our word? And so on one end, you have legal consequences. At the end of the day, it's men with guns that then enforce laws. So you say, hey, here's what a security entitles you to with equity in a company. That holds you accountable, and you're working towards that system. You're aggressively pursuing the legal pathway to allow this to happen. There's technical and legal hurdles to it, but you guys are aggressively moving forward. In the meantime, a lot of what holds you accountable is the social equity that you hold of the trust of these relationships, of these large entities that you want to deal with. That for most people in the crypto space, it's like, right? Like if they lie, if they steal, they do whatever, it's like, it's fine. They just walk away with a couple $1 million in their pocket and nobody cares. Right now, you have extremely large relationships going on here. I mean, even as it's funny, Henry, as you kind of gave a little bit of an intro, you're acting very, very humble here. Just, got a family office. We do some investments that you're not really
I second that.
the level of magnitude that you guys are operating with, and the players that you guys are in the space and who you're involved with.
No, that's a fact.
These types of relationships.
Henry, are you able to say the assets under management of your family office? Is that okay to share? Not to get personal. I I don't share my AUM personally as a family, but
the truth is, I don't know in its entirety. It's a quite complex structure, but it depends also on which vertical you look at. I think the biggest asset class for us is real estate, and in the climate space, one of the biggest investments that we did was recently announced as one of the best funded, growth companies in Europe, raised just 200 million in the last fiscal year, where we're the largest shareholders. So
we're putting that on the Bioscienic as well.
Exactly. It's a logistics company that's trying to change the way that we ship freight across Europe. So we do a lot of different things in the space, but personally, especially the nature-based projects across the globe are close to my heart, simply because I think we owe it to our future generations. And even though this conversation has been very much around the financial aspect of investing, I think, at least for me and a lot of my peers in my network, there's also an aspect around investing for responsibility, right? I just had my first child, 4 months old, and you really get to know what it means to protect future generations when you have your own kid.
Yes, I have two young ones myself. So
yeah, exactly. So, you know, and
I have big ones. My little one's sitting behind. He's 18.
in the whole crypto space, obviously there's a financial component to it as well. But what I also like is the aspect of saying, look, I believe in the company and what they're trying to do and in the impact. Now, even though, you know, the Web3 space does have the risks that were just previously outlined, ultimately what it comes down to me is value. And value is not only financial, but it's also intrinsic and global value. And you know, that's a key aspect of you know, what William and Midori Earth and the non-Kyoto Protocol are working on, and what projects like Chaco Vivo, as an example, are trying to do globally. So.
totally understand. I think what we see in
One
crypto
comment,
is
Bob,
sorry,
if I may.
yeah, go for it.
No, I just want to, on this point, because if not, I'll forget I'm the old man on the call. We also back to that integrity and ethics. I mean, one point that I really clearly want to make and, you know, make sure that people understand is that NKP, the projects already exist and have existed for years before the idea of NKP. These projects rely zero on NKP. And I've heard comments about various questions that you know, taxes and things of this nature. Keep in mind that the foundational projects, the initial allocation is more than $5 million coming from me. I didn't have to do that. So I'm the largest single investor in NKP at all at the moment. So, you know, and then the token makes 0 cents if we don't scale. Like, I'm never going to generate 20, 30, 40, $100 million from a 5% tax that we're going to eliminate in soon anyway. So this is not about taking a Web3 project and generating personal wealth. We're already generating, as you can see, hundreds of millions of dollars in personal wealth. So the token is literally an irrelevant arm of this project development. What is not irrelevant is this idea and thesis of scope, to where we can grow this thing into something that gives us different access, that couples Web 2, Web 3, and the best of those both worlds. Because Web 2 in some ways is very slow, is very cumbersome, is very opaque, is very difficult to access. Web 3 is the opposite. It's fast, it's quick, it's immediate. Cross-border banking issues are solved instantaneously. So, I mean, you have a lot of good things. And if you're an ethical actor, you can use these things for good of the planet, good for people, good for business. And there's zero part in our white paper, zero part of our economic thesis that says we need NKP money to do these things. So this is where these relationships to us are paramount. They're way more paramount than the Web3 sort of back and forth, because if we don't maintain our ethics, if we don't maintain our integrity and fiduciary to our capital providers, game over. It's game over for future scale, and it's game over for us to ever come sit in offices like this again.
I wouldn't only say your capital providers, but I think your partners.
Partners. I mean, these are our friends, partners, colleagues.
If you look at just like
Even
Atenil as a project, as an owner, I mean, the reason why they're trying to save this is because they stick to their morals and what they believe in is right,
Yes.
right? That's why they're conserving this massive ecosystem that's at critical threat. Now, they are closely entwined with you personally,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
With Creative Carbon, with the partners associated to this. And in an event of, you know, a fraudulent case or something,
It's over.
you would lose those relationships.
Exactly.
And those relationships are significantly more worth than
Than the Web3 space.
and yeah.
And then also just the integrity of the projects. You have to keep in mind that these are very regulated projects. So lack of ethics, one way or another, would have already sort of hindered development in any format that we're talking about. So that is first and foremost to us, whether you have a fiduciary duty by gun or a fiduciary duty by handshake. Our handshake fiduciary is so much more important than the other side, because we must maintain these relationships. But it goes down to also just to your character, your ultimate character. Like, if you
Totally.
have bad character, it's going to come out one way or the other. And here, I've 30 years experience, as Henry mentioned, and well known in certain spaces. That character would have already shown itself.
Yeah.
So for
And
us,
to the point that we're trying to make, and just for everyone watching, is we want to remove these kind of objections off the table so that you can focus on the good work and the scale that can happen in the future. So just
yeah, you know, a lot of this, because it's thinking about the audience that we're speaking to. Because the thing is, like, Will and Henry, very used to speaking to a high level audience, a lot of large, serious players in the world. And one of the things that, again, in crypto, right, this whole thing is that it opens up investment access to everybody around the world, and it's usually people with much less money getting access to invest in things that they would never have been able to be a part of in any way. And one of the things then is, then when you're at that lower level, you're very concerned about, like, okay, how's this going to put a few more dollars in my pocket? And sometimes people could be listening to all this and they're like, Will, okay, that's great that you're saving the world and saving the planets and saving the animals, but, like, how's it going to make me, money? And one of the things is that what many people don't realize is that once people have achieved a level of financial success, their gaze shifts away from how do I put more dollars into my pocket into how do I make my dollars do something fantastic, do something worth doing for the world, for my legacy, for my children, the things that you're talking about, Henry, the things that you're talking about, Will. Like, that's the vision. It's like sitting at the table and just talking about, hey, here's how this is going to increase a few dollars. Like, that's not exciting. That's not the purpose of your life. The purpose of your life is to use your assets for something phenomenal and good.
Well, I think you're correct, because it's your emotional outlook changes, because the money side becomes technical. It is, what is our return on investment in this regard? Because profit and sustainability are the same word. Without profit, it's by default unsustainable. So you start to look at, okay, putting your capital good use, making it an ethical investment. How am I able to help other people? The profit then becomes calculus. It becomes technical side. That's a non-emotional outlook of it. We need 30, 40, 50, 70, 80% margins, 200% margins by default. So it is that if you want to scale this, there's only two ways to scale. That's by becoming extremely profitable in your smaller steps, and then maintaining your integrity and your business relationships. Because all of these things, I don't even Goldman Sachs, they also have partnerships to give them this larger capital stack. So these partnerships and your integrity and your technical capacity and your ability to emotionally address certain things, but then looking from an ethical standpoint, this all is in one big bubble of the way you finance global projects, and you get partnerships that, as Henry said, are closer than just arm's length. They become arm in arm. You become friends with these people. I mean, Henry and I are friends, colleagues, through business, because we share values. We share this sort of outlook of impact finance. At the same time, we need the profit margins. We need the profit margins because, like I said, I don't want to sneer at $5 million. It's a lot of money, but in the grand scheme of things and what we're trying to do, it's not. I mean, that's a small ticket item for a minority stakeholder in our projects. So what we're talking about is hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's where we have to climb to, and where we will climb to with this. We've already done it in the sector with other things, other SPVs, other entities. Now we're just doing it with Maduri Earth, and we're adding an additional layer of the Web3. So that's the bridge between what we've already done and our verifiable successes already in the world, and then now bringing it into a Web3 space. How can we do this? We're also figuring that out in real time. So that, in a nutshell, that is what we're doing, and that is our thesis.
So then to recap just a little bit, make sure I'm understanding, the audience is understanding. While you are pursuing the best legal path to give legal weight and protection for token holders, so they know they're holding something real, that's a piece of this company. In the meantime, the value prop for the token itself at the moment would be that 30% of the profit coming from these ventures gets used to buy back the token, and the other 70% gets reinvested into future projects and endeavors.
Absolutely. That's correct.
And of the revenue that you've covered so far, you're talking about Chaco Vivo. You guys manage that whole project. That's going to produce $750 million worth of carbon credits. Over the next 10 years. At the moment, it's just 100,000 credits, approximately 2.5 mil that's allocated, but there are opportunities for that to potentially expand. Nothing that's promised right now, but there are exciting opportunities there that start to reach into that.
I think probably, Bob, in this regard, we'll in the next 2 weeks make a few more announcements about allocation. We're pretty comfortable.
The next 2 weeks, folks.
We're pretty comfortable with some new allocations. We've
Nice.
onboarded a couple new projects. We've added 2 new RED projects and 2 new IFM projects. So those are interesting. Those are nature-based solutions that I'll present. And then obviously I mentioned the biochar, the waste to fuel, and the biochenic. There'll be some information coming out both on our website, on our marketplace, Bob, which we'll maybe talk about that too, that's coming out. So yes, the information correctly, rightly so, whilst we navigate these very complicated legal and regulatory structures for token equity, we're building. That building's not slowing down. I mean, for a lot of people, like I say, even me in my early career, $5 million was so much money. I say, oh my God. There are some investment groups and people that we talk to aren't even talking, won't even sit down and take an hour with you for a $5 million ticket. So what my point is that we have to scale and leverage what we've already built to scale this to the levels that we want to, so that the people that we're already at the table with also are more interested in what we're talking about. So it's sort of this multiple different grind, if you will. We're building in the Web2 space. Trust me, I know that doesn't move. I've been shocked at the bipolar reactions of Web3 because I wasn't really in that space, but it's a 5-minute pleasure point. Like if you don't change the world in 5 minutes, the people are upset. If you do, everybody's happy again. But you have to sort of try to merge, if you're involved with Maduri Earth, this mindset of the longer build. And I think that if you understand the thesis, and if you're able to also understand the ethics and the integrity required for what we're doing already, so that you do get that verifiable trust, it makes it a little bit easier to sort of not get into those those ups and downs as rapidly, and to also understand that we're building NKP isn't relying on, we're not relying on NKP for any of this funding. I mean, this funding is coming from other sources. It's coming from our other allocations from the projects. It's coming from our own investments. It's coming from new deals, so on and so on. So that eventually will merge together. And then that's when you'll see this sort of fantastic thing, in my opinion, take shape.
Yeah, I just wanted to recover, right, what you've articulated here, right, about kind of scope and a little bit of the future of saying, right, there's the $100,000 credits from Chocolate Beaver that is committed, saying, all right, next couple weeks, there's going to be some interesting announcements about potential expansion with the waste valorization plant in the Dominican Republic. That whole thing at the moment is going to be producing 750,000 credits per year,
at the current quantity, which is already scaling.
Right, of which 75,000 credits per year is getting allocated to Maduri Earth and NKP, which should be around 2.5 million in annual revenue. But you're saying that the plant itself is expanding its capacity, and if and when that completes, that would also multiply the amount of credits that would be getting issued there.
Both, even Choco Vivo, because keep in mind, this allocation is a very small percentage of the ownership in my other companies. So as we scale these projects in real time, that gives us comfort to allocate more to Maduri Earth, because it becomes a increasingly and growing lower percentage of our overall ownership in those projects. And then that includes pipeline projects that we're rolling into it as well. So allocations from those will also be coming into Maduri.
You mentioned removing the tax on the token. Are you planning a token migration, or what does that look? Currently, the token's on Ethereum.
That is part of our this process, if you will, from token to equity. So we don't know yet is the answer, unfortunately, but
that's fine.
It could be required. Our goal is not to do that, but it depends on how two things. final jurisdiction of location on Maduri Earth, which could be multiple jurisdictions, that special purpose vehicles are normal, and then the regulatory requirements in those jurisdictions on how that transition can occur. So in 2 cases that I know right off the top of my head, it would require a token migration. Now, we're looking at some other and exploring some other opportunities, because what we don't want to do is, like I said earlier, we don't want to overcomplicate it and just have created a securities where we could have just launched a private company and private equity and sold that private equity on the market. It's not what we're trying to do. We've created the Web3, we've created NKP token. Now we want to convert that over. So all of our effort is for that sort of transaction. Do we know exactly what that looks like? Unfortunately, not on this call, no. But we're getting there. And we should, like I said, I think before the end of the year, we'll have a clear pathway to that we'll present to holders and to stakeholders.
Got it. Some more on that. If there's any final questions, please drop them in the chat. We're going to try and potentially start wrapping this up. Bob, I want to make sure we're hitting all the community questions thoroughly. I mean, this has been a great introduction to this business, kind of blowing my mind a little bit at the potential scale of this. But Bob, is there anything else that we should tap into here?
Yeah, so maybe talk a little bit about the numbers, because you've talked categorically about the projects that are going on, and that's why I wanted to kind of reiterate the numbers for people that don't have a good picture of the scope and scale here of what we talked about with the landfill and how that's actually going to continue to scale and could increase. You talked about biochar, facility and waste to fuel facility, these upcoming projects. Can you, without giving promises of exact numbers, can you indicate what kind of scale or revenue these future projects would be doing?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some notes. So from our let's divide these into 2, pipeline and foundational. So foundational, we're considering a larger allocation. So those, even without scale, could increase revenues, could double the revenue on a per annum basis. That depends on the final information that I said that I will release in the next 2 weeks. Asking for a bit of patience, but I can tell you for a fact there will be some increased allocation. So that's that one. And that's from both projects. That's from DR and Chocovivo. Okay. Pipeline projects. So I made notes because I'd hope this would come up. So our waste to fuel project, we're already making investments right now, and that's it's about a $1.6 million in CapEx investment. We want to scale that, but that gives us a little over $3.5 million a year in revenues with about a 45% margin. Allocation from that will be somewhere around an additional $1 to $2 million a year, something like that, to Maduri/NKP. And of course, that'll be allocated in some fashion. At the moment, 70-30 split, like we've already discussed. So that's for the waste to fuel, okay? That's the plastic to fuel. Our biochar is going to give us roughly, this will be second quarter, we're going to do somewhere in the 25,000 metric ton a year. Now, these numbers are irrelevant, but from a revenue standpoint, that's going to be around $21 million in revenue, 13 million in gross profit. So that would be an allocation somewhere around $3 to $4 million allocation to NKP per annum.
Wait, are you saying the biochar facility is going to be doing 13 million in profit?
Yes, probably more. Keep in mind.
What is biochar? Just for those that don't know.
So biochar is a carbonized. It's a biogenic material that's been carbonized. So our wood is from wood. In our case, woody biomass material, waste wood from ag sector and forestry sector in Paraguay. So these are sustainably harvested wood products, so on and so on. We're also acquiring a big land with a species called vignal, which is basically a hardwood mesquite, which is an invasive species. So it doesn't get into the whole deforestation realm because it's an invasive, thorny, useless species that you can coppice, meaning you can cut it and put it on rotation. So that's all going to be put into a pyrolysis plant, which means you basically just heat this up in the absence of oxygen and carbonize, get the full carbon out of that biogenic material, that woody biomass. That material then can be used in simplest terms, in very simple pyrolysis, is charcoal. so wood fuel.
So like
However,
cooking for cooking and stuff like
we're
that.
not using it for cooking. We're using biochar, meaning that it's actually manufactured under more stringent sort of processes, meaning you're controlling temperature, residence time, and your retort. Sometimes it requires additional gases put into the process, so on and so on, so that you get this high value product. It can be used in a multitude of industries, from agricultural use, like a green fertilizer. It can be used in beverage processing, like water treatment, beer, waste processing facilities, and other places. It's used in electronics, so on and so on and so on. So it has a lot of different uses. Again, we're starting with lowest hanging fruit, which is the biochar ag industry, and also using animal husbandry projects as feed. So I'll be putting some more stuff out about this on X and on our website in the next 2 weeks. So we're using it in the first cases for biochar for an ag input, and biochar for animal feed for cattle. So it does a lot of different health benefits for cattle and reduces methane. Cow farts, I'm sure everybody's heard of that thing that people like to say. So it reduces methane extraction from cattle, improves their health, increases their weight, so on and so on. So it's a win-win for the animal husbandry rears, the commercial operations, because they get more weight for the cow with less food, and improves their health, so on and so on. In the biochar for agriculture, it improves growth yields, so farmers make more money from that. So that produces carbon, and then it also produces the tangible product of the biochar that we're selling into the space. And then we'll develop more advanced biocarbon. We have, through one of our partnerships, they have produced a binder so that we can make a metallurgical coke replacement from biochar. So that would go into steel mills and steel manufacturing. So a lot of different industrial uses.
So that's okay. So of the future projects, talk about this waste to fuel might be in the range of like 1 to 2 million annual profit. This whole
No,
biochar.
it's gonna be more annual profit, but that's the allocation due to our portion ownership.
Gotcha,
in
right.
the
Because NKP, you guys have a lot of partnership projects where if you expand into some other $100 million venture, Midori Earth is not going to own that outright. There's going to be portions. So there's going to be a lot of different
We'll
partner
own our
projects.
equity. We'll own our equity in that joint venture, if you will. So we do
Yeah,
own the
yeah.
project, but we own a percentage of that with our financial partners.
Okay, so right, so it'll be in that range of like 1 to 2 million would be what is owned by the plastic to fuel facility. For the biochar, you're saying it'd be somewhere in the range of 10 to 13 million in annual profit from the whole biochar venture.
Yeah, it's a 21 to 25 million annual revenue gross, and then our net margin to bring it somewhere around 13 mil. So our allocation in that would be $3 to $4 million.
Okay, and then were there any other projects right in the pipeline that you could talk about, kind of the magnitude of
Well,
what they would be?
we've onboarded 2 other red projects. They're smaller, but they're with indigenous communities. So those are going to generate, probably an additional, each one probably additional $1 million in revenue for us. But keep in mind, they're very slow developments. We're talking three years from now when those will be developed. And then we have 2 IFM, that's an improved forest management projects that we're doing with Turuma, one of our partners that I've mentioned in one of my tweets. So we're doing all of the forestry management. Transparency will probably get involved in that. It's another meeting we have after this call. And for the monitoring, and we're doing the carbon, as well as participating obviously in the management and the development of those. Those will generate faster revenue because we're producing sustainably harvested wood plus carbon. So we avoid full clearing, but we do sustainable wood harvest. So there are tangible revenues coming off of that in the short term while we build out the carbon side. So those are also in the pipeline. And then the final project is there's a highway being built that connects Chile to Brazil that runs through Paraguay, and we're working on a development of a logistics hub. But that is a very large CapEx project, $100 million. But we will own a percentage of that. What the revenues will be from that, I don't know at this point. We're still working on the business models and partnership deals and things of nature for that. But it will be a huge high profile project. Oh, I tell you something I didn't mention that is quite interesting is a friend of mine, Ross Grayson Bell, was the writer producer of Fight Club, I'm sure it's a movie everybody is aware of. We're onboarding him as our creative director. And we're also working on indigenous, as Henry's very familiar with, an indigenous docu-series for distribution potentially on Netflix. So that's something that will also be part of the Maduri Earth ecosystem and holdings. And you'll see Ross on our website pretty soon. He'll be official creative director for everything we do and helping with marketing and things of that nature. So that's also a non-immediate revenue generator, but a very cool aspect of the project.
Yeah, that's super cool. So then I think kind of summarizing some of this, I want to kind of ask a question pitching about the future, which is saying, all right, imagine a year from now and 5 years from now, if everything goes according to plan, you're able to execute on the things you want to do, just super high level estimate. Where do you think, Maduri Earth can be in terms of assets under management and annual revenue that it's doing next year and 5 years out?
It's really easy for us, mate. I mean, we at the moment we're at about a $30 million valuation if you put in all the allocation and the projects and the discounted cash flows. But our goal is to at least double that on an annual basis. So I mean, from 30 to 50, and then by next year, and then hopefully, our end goal is 500 million. But I think that would be a 5-year plan. But the next 2.5 years, we would like to be at a 150 million sort of range. And I think it's attainable. I mean, if we lay it out if you see the financials, you see the business plans, you see the models, you see our capacity of partnerships. These numbers sound giant, but they're very attainable for us. I mean, end goal is that we have a $1 billion operation, but that's aspirational, I think. But certainly within the 1.5, 1.25 to $500 million range in the next 5 years, for sure.
Very cool.
A lot of love in the chat, by the way. NKP holders, love you guys. So,
But I mean, just to our NKP holders, my son is a holder, my daughter's a holder. I mean, I started this, which I mentioned on the call when my son asked me how he can get involved. We appreciate you guys. We consider you stakeholders. You're building this as much as we are. It's going to take all of us to make this successful. So, good point, Bob. It would have been remiss not to mention our mutual love and respect for them, that we understand it's hard when somebody says trust us because you don't know who we are. But we are doing everything that we've said on this call we're doing. Does that mean that we might make some mistakes? Certainly, we made some mistakes on launch, but we're clearing those up. We're figuring it out very quickly. We're all quite astute individuals, quick learners, and we adjust accordingly. But at the end of the day, it doesn't change our objective. It doesn't change our focus, and it doesn't change our goals. And I tell you, it doesn't change what we've succeeded in everything we've ever set out to do. I don't see us falling short in this regard either, but thanks to all the stakeholders, which is what I like to call our holders, our NKP family and the community. We appreciate you too. So thanks.
awesome. Bob, did you have any final questions to wrap this up on, or is that
No, I mean, I think this has been really informative. I think the only one that's going to be pressing, especially for the holders of people that are just very crypto native, is still kind of that when question. They want to know, like, hey, when, right? Here's all this massive revenue that's coming, but it's all been future, so to speak. And they want to know, all right, hey, when does money start hitting?
Right now for Chaco Vivo, I think, if you're alluding to buybacks, my goal is this month. So without making any huge commitments, I can tell you right now that we want to start that sooner rather than later. We're working on things right now for that to happen. So stay tuned in the next 48 hours. I mean, it's the weekend. So it's also Oktoberfest here. We've got to go out and do some Oktoberfest things. But
you guys gonna go put on your lederhosen and get drunk?
I mean, I'm in lederhosen, my friend. So
let's go. You know what? I have some
baby.
German heritage too myself. And in Canada, we have this town that's known. It used to be called Little Berlin, and they changed it during the war, of course.
Well, my grandfather's from Stuttgart.
Oktoberfest. So,
hey, thank you, everybody. If there's no last questions, obviously ask them in the community if anybody has any follow-ups. I try to answer with my long essays, which I know a lot of people don't like, but I try to be, thorough. But appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks, Bob, for helping me out with the questions. This was a thorough deep dive. And William, I'll give you credit. You are extremely knowledgeable and passionate about what you're doing. And I think that came across to everyone. So
Good, I hope so.
shout out to the
Henry
long
does too. I
essay.
just talk too much. My friend here didn't get to speak, but I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
Henry
Thank you.
too. Honestly, blessing to have you on our channel.
I would tell everyone, go to Transparency. We provided the link. Look at Chavo Vivo. What Henry's done is absolutely incredible on there. You can track it in real time. We're adding new stuff every week. So keep an eye on it. You can see where you're working, where your money's going, what you're building. And I think, you know, I mean, you're making impact. You're changing the world. I mean, like it or not. You are doing it, even though I understand everybody want to make money. So do we. I said profit and sustainability are the same word. So we get it and we're going to get there, but also don't lose sight of your impact. Take a look at what you're doing.
And I added NKP to our sponsors bar too as well. So the symbol's
Awesome.
there. So go check out NKP on your favorite trading terminal. And yeah, we'll do this
Thank you.
again probably in a quarter or so from here.
Yeah, let's do it again before the end of the year to follow
Sounds
up on
good.
what I committed to.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
It was a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you.